out back in round about 2003, it really was like some kind of best kept secret at that point. Lots of the places where I worked felt that, particularly in a hospital setting, if you were hospitalized with dementia, that was kind of the end of the line. Um, and they weren't into providing activities other than feeding and bathing, and um, so it's been quite a long road to get to here. And it still feels like we're at the beginning of that journey, except there's a lot more of us out there doing it. So thank you so much for your interest in this subject and for your time today. Um, so, as Mary mentioned in the introduction, one of the projects that I've been involved in is one with the Scottish Chamber Orchestra, which is one of Scotland's national orchestras. And that's been going for about 7 years now. Now, I am not an orchestral musician. I come from the other side of the musical tracks. I'm a drummer, not even an orchestral drummer. I just play djembes and things. Um, and I was kind of self taught. So when the opportunity came up to work with the orchestra, because I'd been working with hospitals, I jumped at the chance, but was also terrified. Like, how do we relate to each other? Um, Luckily, in my tool bag had been two marvelous weeks I spent in the company of Music for People. Um, 2 week long, is it the Art of Improvisation camp?
It was 1 week. Maybe it felt like two.
No, but I went twice, so it was like, yeah, so I
Yeah,
came back
we
a couple
loved having you there too. Wow. So
so we came
yes.
to two of these camps, and just for me, who I'd kind of grown up in the drum circle community in a sense, musically, so to have that immersion into other ways of making music, but particularly with improvisation, just did that to my musical world. And then later on came back to me and was such a help in now working with these orchestral musicians, and moving into improvisation. So that's where I thought we might spend our time today. Would be looking at this project. We'll probably spend about the first half of the workshop. I've got some videos to share and a little bit about how we work in that project, particularly if there's musicians out there who either already work in this field or who are thinking of working in this field. Um, this is me trying to reel you in and say this is a brilliant place to work. And also that quite often a lot of people, when we first come to this kind of thing, imagine, oh, it's the old songs. The old songs are going to be great. It's just what people want. It's old people, they want old songs. But actually, there is such a potential for making new music with people and for having these moments now. We don't stop being creative. We don't stop being able to do new things just because there's changes going on in the brain. Um, so familiar music is wonderful. It's really important. It's a huge tool, but the ability to meet the musical moment, as this workshop's called, um, and to have those interactions with people is hugely important. It reaches a different part of the brain, and the more different parts of the brain we can reach, the better with music. So the first part, we'll look at that project. The second part, I thought it'd be lovely to have a chat with Mary and maybe any other folk who have been involved in that Music for People community, just about that wonderful legacy of Music for People and dear David Darling, who's given us all so much.
Thanks.
Because these are things that really saved my life in this project as well.
So happy. I
Um,
know it's so fun to know that. By the way, if anybody wants to, Mike, you might have said that and I just missed it. Um, if you would have questions or comments, pop them in the chat bar and we will track that as we go along. Great, Jane.
mm. And the other reason I'm going to talk about the orchestral project is that we've also just released a musical resource online as well. So for folk who may be more from the kind of care background and activity coordinators, we've got about an hour or so of music online now, split up into different videos, that are available for people to work with from home. So we'll talk about that first, so you can get your hands on the resources first, and then we'll go into more of a discussion. So I think the first thing I'd like to do would be to play you just a 2-minute, 2.5 minute video of the project. And I think that sets the scene better than I ever could. But basically, it's been 7 years we've been working together with the orchestra, and particularly working with people in hospital who have dementia. And that could either be long-term care, which would be towards the end of life, when the responses and people's ability to participate will be very different to somebody who might still be living at home or working in the community. The other wards we might work in would be an assessment ward, which is often, I think, can be one of the most challenging wards, because that's when things reach a crisis point. Um, that's when your care needs radically reassessed, or you might need different medication. If you've just come into hospital, you might feel like you're being imprisoned or locked up, that your family have sold you out. So to bring music into that situation, I think, can have a huge effect on just normalizing that situation a little bit, or still having that reminder that life is more than your condition or being in hospital, that music can be that little window into opening life back up again. So those would be the two kinds of wards that we work in. And I'll show you a little video if I can make it all work. So I'll do the sharing screen thing. Here we go. I hope that's working. Right.
It's encouraging dementia patients to join in with music making. So it's not just going along and doing a concert for them. It's actually giving out instruments and encouraging them, not forcing them to play, but encouraging them to play, either by demonstrating the instrument and hoping that they'll join in, or by handing it to them and showing them what to do with it. I think there's a big distinction between just playing along and then playing together, playing meaningfully. I was actually contacted by one of the SCO musicians who knew that I worked on music in the brain, and I've been director of this interdisciplinary research institute that looks at the potential benefits of music in different contexts. One of the things we've been working on is looking at how to run the workshops themselves in such a way that most people get the most out of them. And then we're also looking at the way in which people respond to the music workshops. So how do individuals respond? Do they change their movement behaviours? Do they change their vocal behaviours or their facial behaviours? Do they seem different in terms of their mood? So much connection between all of the patients in the group and us, and so we're sort of converging in a sense on this sort of music which is sort of coming out. How the personality will come out again, speak or sing or smile or hold hands. And there'll be a sort of recognition of someone that they know and love and maybe haven't seen for a while, that seems to occur in that musical environment.
That's so beautifully produced, Jane. Wow.
Oh. um, yeah, it was very beautifully made. It was very strange for us to have the video camera in on the music session. Um, so I think it actually ended up as quite a different session to the kind of thing we would normally do. And having kind of talked about this project as being mostly improvisational, of course, in the video they've picked every kind of familiar song. So it doesn't illustrate that aspect as much, but I hope you get a sense of kind of what goes on. So normally, I think from the orchestra, there's a pool of about 12 musicians that have signed up for this project. So they get to choose whether they want to do it or not. And interestingly, most of the cello section signed up. Must be something about cellists.
It is. It's such a
Um,
it's a humanistic. It must be the quality of
yeah.
that instrument. Yeah,
And it's
that's
a beautiful instrument to have in that
oh,
setting as well. It's like another person coming into the room.
yep.
Um, and then each session, we would usually work with up to about 9 people. And there would be 2 musicians from the orchestra and myself as the kind of communicator and sort of mediator person, or the sort of person who's the expert in the healthcare setting. Um, and the brief that we were given at the outset of the project was that it would be about music creation, and not just reproduction, so that it would be about improvisation and about ways to draw people in to participation. Um, and we've had 7 years at this project now, and I think we've developed it into a kind of a format and a practice. At the start, it was very much a kind of trial and error and figuring out what worked, and even things about, the choice of instruments. I remember once having this big tray full of wonderful percussion instruments and offering it to a lady who just went, oh no, no, there's far too many things on the tray. Actually, to have 1 or 2 to choose from would have been much more helpful for her. But I thought I was doing this great favor by offering all these percussion instruments. Um, but gradually we settled down on a format and actually found that kind of pure improvisation, I think because a lot of people, particularly in Scotland, aren't used to listening to music in that way, um, a lot of people would get quite kind of turned off by it, or like, when's the real music coming? Or what are you doing? Play us something we know. So we actually found the great gift of using familiar songs. Would be to kind of bring them in to start the session, to almost find that kind of ah space with a group where it's like, oh, I feel safe, this is what's happening, or they're playing that song that I love. Oh, that's great. But what we would do was start with familiar material, but then take that into an improvisation as well. So we start in the safe place and then almost kind of head off from the side of the swimming pool. Um, and that proved to be a great way to get people involved, because you've kind of hit the spot, and hands and fingers might be tapping, or there's interest there. That really, music does this wonderful thing of grabbing people's attention. So once we've got that, then there's the time to bring in instruments and share them and play with them and go on a different journey. So we've kind of landed on this blend of using repertoire, but then heading off and changing it and improvising. And then as the session progresses, um, it could then go anywhere. Somebody in the group and might just start something, or if they're holding something, they might just start tapping out a little rhythm. And we've worked with the musicians so long that they can now zoom in on that and pick up on it and elaborate on it and wrap that music around the people that we have in the group. um, so it's been quite a journey, and I think it's been a journey for the orchestral musicians themselves as well. Um, Particularly, there's a number of folk we were working with who improvisation was the last thing they wanted to do. Understandably, you spent your whole career playing things absolutely right. I'm sure there's many people who can empathize with this. Um, and that, for me, that was where the music for people training that I'd received came in so handy. all these things about there's no wrong notes, and how to get somebody who is so terrified um, into doing some kind of tiny bit of improvisation. And what's been my delight, as well as working in the hospitals and with the the people with dementia themselves, has also been this double track of working with the musicians in the orchestra and seeing them blossom and grow and learn to be playful, to really connect with people, to explore their musicality. It's just been such a joy to work together with that. And so, as much as it works for the patients and the people that we're working with, it also really worked for the musicians in the orchestra to begin with some repertoire and then start to do little variations on that. For some people, that became the only way they could get into an improvisation. Oh, I can see a something on the chat here.
I
What's
just
gone?
didn't want to forget to ask you
Ah,
about a shift. Was there a shift in the? I'm so curious because you're right. Probably the most difficult people you worked with were the classical musicians in improvisation, which is often the key. Was there a shift as they were in the project longer? Did you notice an opening and a?
I think certainly, certainly, and it's something that continues to this day. At the end of today's session, I'll show you one of the pure improvisation videos we've made,
Super.
and you'll see just how good these guys are because they've got all the chops. So it's
Oh,
just
I know.
to be able to release that and to use it is just wonderful. Um, but I think it's been a very touching journey. I think a lot of musicians have said it's put them back in touch with that real essence of what music's all about in terms of connecting with people. Several people have said it kind of changes how they play or how they relate to an audience, even on the concert hall stage. Um, that they're aware of that in a different way. And I think there's things as simple as, when we enter a hospital setting, we try and do as much as possible without any kind of sheet music or stands in the way, and just that thing of looking up and out and connecting with somebody in that way can be very different to how people would normally relate, particularly in a professional performance capacity. So I think that personal journey with it, and then I think in seeing really direct results from the music, instead of very polite applause somewhere down the line, at the end of the end of the piece, you're getting somebody jumping up and doing that, or just coming alive before your eyes, um, and that's hugely rewarding and a great motivator for taking part. Um, so, oh, sorry, Mary, I think you're
The
muted.
coming, with the coming alive before your eyes has got to be, for me, that's has been, one of the most profound experiences. And for a classical symphonic musicians, that must just blow them away to have
Yeah.
people jumping out of their seats. And that's so cool.
Mhm. And again, there's obviously been times when we've all ended up in tears at the end of a session as well. There was a beautiful time where there was this little man who was just the best dancer in the world. So we'd play and he'd just start to get all that, and he'd jump up in the middle of the circle, and um, ended up his wife had come for a visit, and he'd got so into the dancing he grabbed her, picked her up, and was dancing in the session, and his son was there and was saying, oh, they haven't danced in 30 years. um and so that at that point we all lost it. And so just these beautiful moments. I think another shift for the musicians is learning to adapt on the spot and just change what you're doing moment to moment in response to where people are at. So if somebody's just jumped up to dance and the piece is about to come to an end, do we end it? Or do we try and keep it going somehow and extend it and let that, meet that musical moment and let that happen? Or if somebody's started to get really quite upset, in a way that's not just tears but is actually distress, do we carry on till the end of the piece, or do we find some way to gently transition that into a piece that's less emotionally impacting? So I think these ideas of flexibility, of changing on the spot, of having this kind of menu of activities that we can draw from rather than a concert program, has been a huge shift as well. And I think one that, I mean, it's one that I'm still learning always, is to try and come up with whatever that most appropriate musical response is in the moment. Um, so just in case folk are interested, I've got a couple of slides um, that would just show you what a typical session would look like. And this might relate to the videos I'll talk about later on. So let me see if I can share my...
Can I just jump in for a second too? I've seen so many people work with older adults in so many programs, but I really noticed the eye contact and the intention that was present in some of what you were doing there in ways that I've never thought to do it myself. And I just wanted to point that out. That was fantastic.
Thank you, Mike. And I think eye contact is so, so important. I think some of that has developed when we're working with people who are much closer towards the end of life, who might not have that access to language. Sometimes eye contact is all you have. Sometimes you don't even have that, and it's just the case of looking at how somebody's breathing might be changing in response to have you play. Um, but sometimes the eye contact can be, you know, it's like the tractor beam from Star Trek that really just draws you in. Um, and I think sometimes as adults who are out and about, sometimes I think we can get quite nervous around eye contact. And I think that's been a real change in myself, um, is to now really go for that eye contact and that kind of connection, and to try and, you know, help somebody feel like they matter as well. It's funny that before coming on today, we were talking about this thing on Zoom when you try and look at the camera.
I know. I was seeing that you were looking at the camera for the eye piece to
Trying to
remember
make eye
that.
contact.
Very good.
Great. Let me share these slides. Um, doo, doo, doo. So, we generally, for the session, we'd get 3 hours in that hospital setting, and 1 hour of that would be music delivery. For me, I think this has been wonderful that both the orchestra and the hospital are prepared to invest that much in the quality of the session. And I think to me that connects with music for people's like one quality sound. You know, if that's what you have, how can you bring your highest possible intention to it? So if this is our music session, how can we bring the highest possible intention to this and believe that people are really worth high quality music and the best that we can offer? So we'll usually spend the hour before, we usually get somebody from the staff who will come and tell us who's on the ward today, how they're feeling, you know, if anybody's either a bit distressed or a bit down, if somebody has family visiting, the things we might need to know, whether there's somebody new on the ward, or somebody about to go home. And then we've got the rest of that time to put a session together. And sometimes we'll try and find out if there's particular genres or kind of music that people would like. Sometimes it's just time for the three of us to get into some improvisation, to try and make those connections between our little team that will then carry out into the session. I'm sure, you know, those of us who are on this call who are kind of improvising musicians feel that, you know, when it clicks in with the person who you're improvising with. So we've got time to allow that to happen, before the session. Then during the kind of opening part of the session, we'll often not really have a specific hello, we're here to play music right at the start. Sometimes it's just a case of putting music into space, and putting music into that kind of atmosphere. I think particularly when it's in a hospital ward setting, starting with something da, 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 could be such a break from where people have been in the kind of sensory environment that actually it could have quite a negative effect on people, as much as we love music and how it works. So to be quite unobtrusive and start quite gently, and it's like elevator music or something. We'll just play something gently, and often that just lets people's attention gradually, check us out, see that there's music happening in the room, and gradually tune into us. For the musicians from the orchestra, that could be an opportunity to play one of the classical pieces as well, and just something that they love to play for the sake of it. So we've got our undemanding introduction there. Then we do come into a more kind of formal hello. So we have a hello song. I can sing it for you. Like, hello there, it's good to see you. Hello there, it's good to see you. I must say you've made my day. Hello, hello, hello. I see that the Zoom bing bongs was right in tune there. And so there's the possibility to adapt that song to be able to name each person in the group. Hello, Mary, it's good to see you. Hello, Mary, it's good to see you. And so we really try and take that time to greet each person one at a time and personally. And again, this starts off this theme of being able to improvise. So we can musically adapt that song to each person. If somebody's very tired, we'll take the tempo down. Hello, Mary. It's good to see you. Because if we're tired, if something comes in at a slower rate, it's going to be easier for us to hear and easier for us to respond to. Or if we're quite excited that it's music today, hello, Mary, it's good to see you. And it's that sense that the folks who have come to the session matter and are already this integral part of what's going on. It's not us making a presentation, it's all of us becoming involved in something musical together. And that could take up about 15 minutes of the session sometimes. But it's always worth it, and it always makes a difference to what comes later. Then, as we mentioned earlier, that would often be the time for some kind of no-brainer piece that everybody knows, because it does that thing of grabbing people's attention, of maybe getting some toes tapping, or just that recognition. There's this incredible memory capacity that we do have that's preserved in the face of dementia, that not only helps us recognize songs, but that act of recognizing the song can somehow make lots of other things make sense for us as well. So there's a real magic in these songs that people know. Then, towards the middle part of the workshop, this becomes the bit that we kind of plan but don't plan. So what we do is plan out a number of different resources that hit a lot of these boxes. So we've got familiar music being one of them. The second one's appropriately structured new music. So if we're improvising, there's still things we can bring to that improvisation that makes it very friendly and very accessible if you have dementia. So I'm thinking of repetition, particularly of fairly short phrase lengths, of again things that are a decent tempo for people, not too fast. And by having particularly things with a lot of repetition and quite a steady pulse, it becomes very attractive to join into. The rhythm makes it quite irresistible to start tapping or to start joining in. We'd also pick things that cross an emotional range. I can't remember whether I said this in the last workshop or not. I remember going around one care home once when I was quite early on in this line of work, and I had my ukulele, and there was a woman there that was like, "Go away." I was like, "Oh, okay, may I ask why? She's like, you're going to try and make me happy, and I don't want to be happy. And um, she'd really, she'd had all these people coming to her and saying, come on, cheer up. And she was sick to the back teeth of it, as you or I might be if somebody continually tried to cheer us up when we didn't feel like it. Um, so I said to her, would you like something sad? She's like, oh, aye, yes, yes, aye. So, oh, Danny boy. And we had this huge lament together. Um, and that was exactly what she wanted. And then after that, things softened, and we both made this journey together because I met her in the musical moment, towards doing some different things. But it's this line that I will never forget, is that you're going to try and make me happy, and I don't want it. So, and again, treating all of us as adults, that we laugh together and we cry together, and we're all rounded people, and we all deserve to have all of these emotions recognized in music, and if we can bring that. And it's not, I think, when we're looking particularly at training musicians, it's finding that boundary between what are tears of emotion and what are tears of distress. Now, we definitely don't want tears of distress. Um, and if something like that happens, we'll do what we can to try and take the music in a different direction. But tears of emotion are fine. Um, there's one of my first times in hospital, I started a fairly happy song, and this woman burst into tears, into great heaving sobs. And I said, oh, do you want me to stop? No. And she later said, I'd forgotten who I was, and it was coming back to me through that music. And if I'd have been afraid of the tears and afraid of that emotional reaction, um, these memories might not have come back to her to the same extent. There was another lovely man in a different hospital I've been working with who said, it hurts my heart, but it's a happy hurt, because he's remembering his family, or the person who's associated with that song. So I think it's really important to be able to do the sad things as well as the happy things. Um, Now, my background is all about participation. I love making music with people. It's what I live for. And I think, again, through this project and also through my encounters with music for people, came up with the importance of listening to music as well. To never discount the power of what beautiful music can do in a situation. And particularly when we're in a hospital workshop, people's energy is going to rise and fall. There's going to be times when people have the capacity and the desire to want to join in and play. And then after a while, that can become quite tiring. So we need time to kind of relax, retreat, and regroup. And then that's the perfect point to bring out a cello solo or something that's beautiful for the sake of being beautiful. Um, there's been times when we've been in the hospital and everybody's been asleep in the workshop space, and the three of us have had to sit there and just be very happy putting music out into the space. And then maybe about 10 minutes later, that reaches the spot and does the trick, and people become awake and participative and enjoy that. And so it's, sometimes having that humility of just being able to sit there and play and not demand a response from people either, just to let people be where they're at with it. Um, and then our last little segment here would be things that are interactive and creative. So it's almost like a series of poles or two sides of a pendulum, that in any workshop the energy of a group will swing from being really excited by familiar music, or actually wanting something to change, something new, something different, or to enjoy a really relaxed piece but then take the energy up again, to swing between listening and being a bit more withdrawn into oneself, or being outward, active and participative. And our team have worked a lot in being able to figure out where that pendulum might be at any particular moment. And not, again, not to think in terms of a program or a set list, but more of this musical toolbox that we can reach into from the things that we've prepared in the hour beforehand. It's like, what's the tool we need to meet this musical moment? So it's very much something that's organic and flowing. And, there'll be workshops where it ends up improvised from start to finish because there's a lot of quite active, engaged people that day. And ideally, our musical stimulus will come from the people that we're working with, whether it's hand movements, whether it's actually playing an instrument and doing different things with it, or whether it's just something that somebody seems to like and to be moving to, and how do we do more of that, or how do we continue that kind of response. So yeah, times when it can be wholly improvised, and then times where people keep requesting songs, so we keep trying to play things that people might know. So I think flexibility has been at the heart of that as well. And then at the end of the workshop, we have our goodbye song, suspiciously like the hello song. Goodbye, everyone. Thanks for coming. And I think having these cues at the start and end of the session also week by week helps that sense of security and predictability, and as participants, we know something's going to happen. I think something that surprised me over these workshops has been there's absolutely been an implicit learning curve that has happened session to session. So we spend about 20 weeks of the year going into the hospital, so it's nearly half the year. And then week by week, the first week people are unsettled, they've just been brought into this space, there's these strangers here. Week 2, start to relax a bit, but I might try and offer somebody an instrument and they would just back off and refuse. Third week, they might take it tentatively and explore it. And by week 6 or 7, I'll bring it out and somebody will be grabbing it out of my hands and playing happily to the music, even though when I enter the room, somebody might not know my name or who I was or why I was there. But there's definitely this implicit learning curve that grows session by session as people get more comfortable in that environment and feel safe and secure, like they know what's going on. Then once the session's closed, we go back to our kind of elevator music just to let people have a comfortable departure from the session. Again, we're trying to avoid any very kind of sharp transitions or breaks. So something, it's more like we're just fading out here, going back into the background. Then we get another hour at the end of the session to review it, to find out what worked, think about what might work next time, for particular people or particular settings, and to talk to the staff. So it's kind of sandwiched in these review periods. And that's kind of what we've been doing up until COVID hit. And so something that we did just before Christmas this year was to spend a day filming, and it's something we'd wanted to do for years anyway, because if we're in the hospital for 20 weeks, there's obviously plenty of time we're not there. And to try and not just be, the circus that moves on, but to be something that actually has a relationship that has meaning with people. So COVID ended up being the perfect excuse to create these resources. So we've tried to, as best we can, recreate some kind of feeling of what it might be like in a session. So now on the orchestra's website, and we will pop that link, I think, in the chat and maybe on the website afterwards, we've recorded a number of pieces. We've done the thing with familiar pieces, we've taken into improvisation, we've had some classical pieces just for people to listen to. We've even got a hello song there right at the end if anybody wanted to use it. Hopefully with the idea that somebody might be able to either sit at home or in the hospital or a care home and just take a little drum or something and sit with somebody and have this video almost as a third party to play along with. So if I can find it, I'll play you one of our videos. And this, I'm afraid it's very Scottish resource. We had to, we were a bit tied up with copyright. So of course, you know, very hard to, or it would have taken us way too long to try and get the rights to certain songs. So, I
Are
mean,
in
luckily,
Scotland after all, it's okay.
yes, so in Scotland we've got all of this traditional music available.
Works.
Um, but you know, for folks further afield, you might want to have a Scottish afternoon and to play some of these things.
Yes.
So this is a tiny little excerpt from Loch Lomond, a very well-known Scottish folk song. And I've given you the last chorus, and you can kind of see how we take it into improvisation. And if you have an instrument at home, you might want to try playing along just for the fun of it. Let me share my screen. And I'll just play about a minute or so of this. I'll stop it just there. You can see the butterfly that crept into the filming.
I love the butterfly. Nice effect.
It was the middle of December, and it would obviously found its way into the theatre, and yeah,
Must have
spent the
been
whole evening
music.
with us. Oh. So I think you could see me being kind of hugely over the top there in that video, but I think the intent was then to try and just do something that somebody could map onto in terms of providing like a really simple drumming cue. I'd be very interested to see what it's like down the line and to talk to anybody who's used it to see how it worked out and to see whether it worked. It really, I mean, at this point, it's a real experiment. It's kind of a shot in the dark, and just hoping that that's of some use, even if it's a nice thing to watch for people as well. So those resources are out there. There's some Scottish songs. There's a couple of improvisations. There and a lot of the songs will switch between the song itself and an improvisation. And then there's about 2 or 3 just pieces, which you've got these beautiful musicians who play so well, and it's just a joy to listen to. And it was a joy making it. Yeah, so for folk who are working in these settings, I do hope that's of some use and something that, and I would love any feedback that people have if you do end up using
Did
it.
more projects like that grow after you started that one? I mean, this working with orchestra musicians and symphony musicians. Did other projects start after that? It just is so inspiring, Jane.
I think there's been one. I think it's run by the Wigmore Hall in London, and they literally do improvisation from start to finish. They're very focused on that aspect, and they'll almost, you know, sit in front of a person and play a song in response to who that person is.
Wow.
And I think that's kind of what inspired our project. And I think the way ours has evolved, you know, we found that the repertoire just works to get things started and to kind of, you know, bring the pot to the boil a little bit sooner. um, and then I think certainly in the UK, I think Manchester Camerata is another orchestra.
Okay.
They're doing a project with music therapists. It's almost like you know, there's a few orchestras working in these settings, and it's almost at the moment it's kind of like people have been reinventing the wheel at the
Yeah.
same time. So
Yeah.
each project has a slightly different emphasis. So some might do dementia friendly concerts in the concert hall, which very much is a you know, a presented program. Um, the Manchester one works a lot specifically with music therapists. The Wigmore Hall, they work with improvisation. You know, we've developed our particular flavor, but I think certainly there's quite a few British orchestras have become interested in this way, and I think it's such a wonderful sense of taking people seriously. People
Yeah.
with dementia,
Yep.
you deserve orchestral music as well as any other kind of music. So
Absolutely.
I think it's hugely encouraging.
Lori, do you want to unmute and ask that question? She's got to put something in the chat bar for you. It's a good observation. Oh, let's see. We're not hearing you. You're not muted, but that's funny. I'm not hearing anything.
Mm.
No, I see you talking. Shall I? I can read
Jane.
your. Oh, I'll read your question. Yeah, sorry. Um, she says, I wonder if what are familiar songs change over time, especially now that music in public schools may not be as prevalent as it used to be. It's such a good question, Lori. That's why. What do you think, Jane?
I think it's absolutely. I mean, I've been doing this for nearly 20 years now. So when I started, it was a lot of wartime songs.
Ah,
Um, and
yes.
I'm still meeting people working in care homes who still want to sing the wartime
Wartime
songs, but
songs.
it's a totally different generation now. So,
Yes.
you know, even in hospital, we're getting into songs of the 70s. You know, I'm playing the Eagles and
Yep.
things like that. It's not the songs that we grew up thinking that old people sang. Uh,
Is that
and
because we're becoming old people?
yes,
Oh,
we're
boy.
the
I
old
know these songs. Uh-oh.
Um, and I think it's a great question. I think even longer term, this is going to totally change because at the moment we still have this great gift of working with a generation who kind of grew up. You know, there were only a few channels by which music came to you.
Yep.
So there's generally, you know, in whatever society we're in, we've been in this place of kind of a common repertoire. You know, so somebody plays Elvis, everybody knows Elvis. Um, when we get to probably, I mean, I think even folk like me who grew up in the 80s, you know, could still say, oh, you know, certain bands were popular. But I think beyond that, it gets so diverse in different genres. And I think potentially going forwards into the future, it's going to be music making and improvisation
Yes. I think
that
so too.
becomes the thing that can bring us together and not that act of knowing the same song. um, when I went to Malaysia on this trip that I did looking at music and older adults. So in Malaysia, in this care home I visited, there were people of four different racial backgrounds, people of a Chinese background, Indian background, Malay background, and a kind of Anglophone background. So nobody spoke the same language. So I sat in this session and they'd start a kind of Indian song and all the people of Indian origin would get going and all the people of a Chinese background would kind of sit there and you'd start a Chinese song and everybody would do that. And the part of the session that everybody could join in was when they played drums together.
Mhm.
And that provided that community and that coming together. And so I think if we are casting into the future, it's going to be the music making that becomes our way of being community in that kind of way.
Agree.
It's a great question. It's one that's
Yeah, it is.
Can I
Um,
jump in there for a second?
Mike.
I noticed that too. We've lost our fixed stars. I noticed this working with 4-year-olds. You know, they don't know The songs that I knew that we all knew as children, they don't know nursery rhymes. It's a very different world. And it's interesting to think about 50 years from now, right? We're not going to have the same commonality of music in this way. So there was one other question here, one or two other questions about the video. If it was in iMovie, I'm guessing maybe they're asking if you had made it with iMovie, and just about using Zoom if there's still a digital delay. And part of that is you're not going to get as many frames per second when you show a video in this way over Zoom. So that's part of why it looks very broken and herky jerky.
Yeah, they're much slicker when you go to YouTube and look at them. Um,
Oh
we
yeah.
actually had a wonderful, sensitive filmmaker called Sandy Butler who came. He did both of those videos actually. He did the first one and then he came and shot the second one. And I think he used 3 cameras in the end and edited all that together. So
And I
again, what great investment of resources from the orchestra to want to make something that's of good quality for people.
and I put a link in the chat there to that first video that you showed.
Thank you. And then yeah, we'll share the link for the series of videos as well. So I think maybe it'd be nice to. I realize we're coming like time is
I know. It's like
hugely
the top
against
of the hour. How did that happen?
no, because I would love to just talk a little bit, maybe with you, Mary, and I know there's some other
Yeah.
friends from Music for People here, just about that legacy.
I would
And
love that. Are people okay? Thumbs up. You know that we typically end at 5, but thumbs up. This is. I don't want to stop the conversation, and if you need to leave, we're still recording it. So, yeah, great. I mean, it's always like Jane, keep her on as long as we can.
we're just warming up here.
I know. It's like we're just getting started. So
Okay.
yeah, carry on because I'm actually personally super interested in what techniques and philosophy you drew from joining Music for People. You know, the couple times that you did, and what you've used that has made a difference. So for me, that's really interesting.
I think for me, first and foremost, it took away the fear of working with people from an orchestra. What I loved about the 2 weeks that I spent connecting with Music for People was just the sheer variety of musicians that come along to it. You know, from somebody, you know, who's a top-notch jazz player or orchestral cellist to somebody who's playing their tambourine for the first
The
time.
bun pan, that's right.
And actually seeing that juxtaposition that
Yes.
beginners can play side by side with, you know, highly experienced players. That was a huge foundation for this project. So
Yes.
we don't all need to be orchestral level players to be part of this same music. So it's enough for somebody to
Yep.
be tapping on a drum. And if, you know, the players are sensitive enough, we can wrap music around that and within that. I can
Absolutely.
see Penny waving a
Penny.
hand.
Yes, Penny.
Well, I did a whole weekend of Music for People when David Darling was there, so I had a chance to play with him. But what happens with orchestra musicians, and I was there for decades, is you don't get used to playing with different levels of player. So it taught a kind of flexibility and comfort level with, okay, this person can only play 3 notes on one string. Fine, let's make up something with that. You get adaptable, some really unlikely combinations. Let's say triangle. You know the
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 bunt
hang
pan,
drum,
triangle, and classical flute.
hang drum. Yeah, and it's liberating because you have to do something that's new, but then you realize you can do it. And I remember a group was playing, and I was walking downstairs, and I realized it made a noise, so I started just climbing up and down the stairs to accompany what they were doing. I mean, it just really opens up your ears to sounds from everywhere and possibilities, and it was fantastic that way.
Yeah.
Thank you, Penny. And I think that chimes directly into what might happen in working with a session with people with dementia.
Mhm.
So if somebody's got a drum and actually this is what they can do and this is where it's coming, then that's our starting place and that's where we work from.
Mhm.
Um, there was one time there was a woman in the hospital who had been a cellist, um, but she would walk around the hospital like that all day. And, she was not interested in picking something up. I think she would look very intently at the person playing the cello. There was that recognition there, but wouldn't play it. But we were kind of determined to see what would happen. So we brought in a smaller cello. We had this kind of purple one that they used in the education department. Um, and eventually got to a state where she was able to hold the bow, and then I had the cello with the open strings, sliding it along the bow. Um, and then the other musicians in the group just picked up these open strings and wove a melody in and around that. And that's such a skill, like you say, to make music from the thing that's actually there.
Yes.
So it's meeting that musical moment again. Um, and then I could just see this change at work in this woman, that it just opened up, and eventually she managed to rest the cello on her shoulder and play the open strings herself. And then, as we left the session, rather than walking around the ward like that, she was open, and just, it was a beautiful transformation to see. And I think it was the same. It was the same for me. It was experiencing those strange combinations, um, that made me think this is completely possible to do this, with people of very different abilities and capacities and musical things to play with.
And I love that you did it and you had the opportunity to take it and use it in this incredibly expanded way. I mean, for me, and you were doing your dissertation then?
Yes, yes. So
Were
I
you
think,
doing, I think when you came to us, you were in the middle of
yeah,
crazy
yes.
dissertation land.
So half of it was looking at drum circles, but I wanted to bring in other musical forms
Yep.
as well, because I saw this movement at work of kind of breaking music open from either just being a professional or just music education. That
Yep.
there's this place in the middle where we just make music together. And I could see these different forms coming up, and just wanted to study that and see what it did for us. Um, and it's been a great opportunity to take that out there, and actually put it into practice, and work with people. And I think so. It's been great for working with people with dementia, but it's also, this other hand has been great for working with the orchestral musicians. So I think
Yes.
even that primary
Win-win.
concept of no wrong notes, just start there. Or the one note solo for somebody who's
Yes.
terrified.
Yes.
Um, that it's really been this journey that we've been on together, and to see the musicians themselves blossom through that as well. So how to structure improvisation so that it sounds musical and has a form to it as
Right.
well.
And the
Um,
listening piece is so huge. You brought
yeah,
that up several times, and that is listening and then tuning into what's going on. And like you said, finding a way to meet it and bring it out of people that don't feel musical. But for me, the classical musicians are often the ones that are so afraid of being off the page that really the work is to free them up, because the dementia patients are like in the moment anyway. And so they're like, hey, I'm here. So the beauty is really, for me, hearing you talk about this and seeing what's developed from that is the fact that anyone can create, anyone of any age, of any background, of any musical skill can create meaningful music together. And it's
and I
about the
think
process.
yeah, I think one of the other things is that thing of bringing your authentic self,
Yes.
finding your authentic self-expression. And
Yeah.
again, I think in both contexts is hugely important. If you're working with people with dementia, they will see through you straight away.
Oh,
They're
yes.
geniuses at seeing through any kind of veneer or self-presentation.
David used to say any caca.
Absolutely.
So any caca, they'll find it. We know.
Yeah.
Hey, Jim, you want to unmute? He's got
Yeah.
his hand up.
Am I muted? No. Can
Now
you
you
hear
are.
me? Okay. I had experience with music for people probably 20 years ago in New York, and David set up this thing where NPR was going to come and record. Do you remember that, Mary?
Um,
Was that before
no.
you?
Oh no,
Okay.
I bet
Anyway,
you
long time ago, and NPR was going to come, and they were going to record stories, but they wanted to have background music for it. And David came up to me, and I just was learning the tenor sax, and I dropped it while I was there, and the octave T is bent. And so I'm really, you know, I had a great excuse not to play. And he came up to me, and I said, you know, I can't do this, Dave. And he says, you can do this.
Did you?
Well, you know, I respected this guy a lot, and I couldn't say no. So, okay, I'm doing it. And there's an African-American woman that's telling a story of her abuse in her life and how she came out of all that. And so I went and I was talking with her, and I was very moved by what she said, her story. And then when they were going to record it, you know, I was no longer shy.
Good.
And I started to play, and I never played like that. Sounds were coming out that I had no idea. So I think I do retreats in Wisconsin. I was center there. And that really spoke to me. We have to hear each other's stories. And that's true with people with dementia.
Yes.
Whatever they can get a hold of, because that opens a kind of door for music and connection and eye contact and all those things. And so I use that in the city, getting police and Black young men hearing each other's stories, and then something can happen. And that works with music.
That's fantastic. Wow, what a beautiful thing to share too, Jim. Thanks.
That's a beautiful story. And I think that idea of deep listening as well. How can we deeply listen to our fellow musicians, but to the people that we're in front of, the people that we're working with? And how can we really receive and say yes to that?
Is Joanne still here? Yes, Joanne, did you have your hand up?
I did, and it relates to what Jim was saying. In MFP, it's not only all level of experience, but all level of emotion. When I started there, I didn't realize such a huge range of emotion could be heard and understood. And I definitely relate to that. What you said about the lady who felt unhappy. I work on Zoom today with a woman. The activities person brought the iPad in, and she just glared at me. And the assistant said, Judy feels bad. And I thought of Yay Energy from MFP. And I have an orchestral piece on my list that I hardly play, of the Bach fugue of like, da da da. And I just said, come on, let's just act out this feeling. And she did just a little, she did smile a little. I'm just saying, there's so many great things from MFP that I'm grateful for, that they opened. Yay Energy.
Yay, that's wonderful. I love it. It's the virtual person staring at you. I mean, now it's like, oh my God, on the screen. That's great. Thank you, Joanne.
So I'm going to go ahead and throw the Music for People link in the website. That's who we're talking about, MFP. And there's a link there also to donate if you'd like to help continue with these programs that you're a part of today. And I'll put Mary's link in there as well, and something else that she'll tell us about.
Great. Jane, do you want to anything else in wrapping up, or are we?
Oh, I think I'm just it was like we could go on all
we
night
could go on
here.
for hours. We'll have to have the third installment. We'll just have to get another date.
But just I think it's just my profound gratitude to the whole Music for People community and to David and his work, that it really does live on. I think there's a huge legacy there. And it's, you know, it's touching people's lives and going out there.
That's so beautiful. Patricia, it's so beautiful to hear. Thanks, Jane.
This was wonderful, Jane. Thank you so much. And of course, Mary. I am a music therapist and I work with dementia folks. And of course, it's been very difficult with Zoom. I mean, but I do have a new client who's, you know, going to see showing up at the screen, but she's very progressed, very advanced. But what I'm really excited about is your project with the orchestra. So I just wondered if I could be in touch with you, because this is a whole infrastructure. So, I mean, how do you get this to happen? Because I'm used to going in as myself in one-man band, but having the orchestral instruments is just
Oh,
such
brilliant.
another wonderful, wonderful way, and to just, yeah, so if I wonder if I could be in touch with you about that.
Yep, yep, you're
We
really
have your
welcome.
info, right? Did we put your info in the chat bar?
Sorry, Jane, I forgot to get your website. If you wouldn't mind
Oh,
putting yours in.
thanks, Patricia.
Yeah, thank you. Good to see you, everybody.
So good to see you after such a long period of time.
You go.
Yeah,
Hey, thanks for joining.
I use them. I use the techniques myself.
Mm.
Fabulous. Jane, do you have any workshops, anything coming up you want to share? I mean, I know you're in Scotland and we can't get there.
Yeah, so there.
So there. We're not
um,
going anywhere.
no, I think we're very much locked down in Scotland at the moment. So there's
Yeah.
not much happening. I'm hoping to put together, this is slightly on a different topic, a drum circle theory online workshop.
Cool.
Uh, so
Good. Will that be on your, if they're looking there, that'll be on your website?
I shall spam all of the online
Please
Facebook
do.
groups. Do that.
Please do.
And then I think the next thing in person we might have would be the drum circle play shop in the autumn. All things going well.
Yeah, in the autumn. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
what we're all looking at. Laura, you're going to go in the fall over to Scotland. Yay, I know. We're all like, oh.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jane. Wow, I just cannot thank you enough. That was so, so beautiful. Laura, do you have another thing to say? Oh, no, you're just waving.
I,
Mike, do you have?
Well, I'll just mention too, as Dr. Jane said, so I met her through our teacher, Arthur Hall, and so we're both trainers for village music circles. So at some point, you'll be able to take fun programs with her that are just for participants. That's part of what she was talking about with the play shop, but she can also teach you more about running drum circles. And I also have another program of my own that I'm going to be starting next week that I wanted to mention that is just based around weekly wellness and just simple everyday tools that you can use anywhere to help stabilize and be more present and relax and combat stress and anxiety and just creating a weekly practice together. And I'm going to share at least a dozen tools there. So I'll put that link in the chat as well.
That in the chat bar.
I,
And we have a
I
couple
have
of
two
Jim.
thoughts. One is that I want to thank Mary and others that have kept music for people alive after David's death, and well, and before that, even some years ago. And the other thing is, I would be interested at some point if we started off a workshop and introduce everybody in what they do.
Yeah.
And I'd be interested in getting Mike's website. I get Mary, I get your stuff all the time. And Jane, if they could be down listed, but it would be really nice to have a little eye contact and find out what everybody does.
Sure. Yeah.
But I know there's time for that. I
I
have
know.
to go. Thank you all.
We use breakouts for that too because we feel the same way.
Yeah.
So we really want to talk to people. Next week we have Kate Geller, and she is, if you do not know of her, she is amazing. And she is in LA, and she's been doing Sing for Yourself. She's been doing all kinds of community music making in choirs, choruses, and singing groups, working with dementia, Alzheimer's, working with all ages in healthcare and also in the community. She's been doing this for a long time, and she's pretty amazing. So if you're free, do join us next week. It'll be here same time, 4 o'clock on Wednesday, Eastern Standard Time. And I will send that out a little bit more about Kate. You can go to the newsletter or to the website and see it as well. We also have our Fill Your Home with Music project coming up this weekend. When COVID hit, we started immediately thinking, what can we do online? How can we stay connected? And so Irene is a facilitator for Music for People in Canada, in Montreal, and Cleona is in Switzerland. And so the three of us started a project called Fill Your Home with Music. And we were every week for a period of time for trying all the Music for People skills, seeing what works online, what can we do? We've got latency, how can we work together and create music? So this has gone on. And now we're meeting once a month. And so if you're interested in that, Mike, did you put that link in the super? So the link is in the chat bar. You can change. You can keep the chat bar. I see Mike made some amazing notes of the talk.
Oh.
So if you want to save it, I think everybody has the availability to go to those three dots next to file, and you can save the chat on your computer. So please do that if you'd like. It's always nice to have that. Again, Jane, are you going to play us out? Thank you, everybody, for coming.
I will play one of the improvisation videos with the orchestra so you
Oh,
can hear how
perfect.
this legacy plays out. So let me just share my screen.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. What a fabulous session.
Thank you,
Thanks, everybody.
everybody. Appreciate your time and your thought and all of your
You can
wonderful.
unmute quickly and say, yay, thanks.
Yay, thanks.
Hey, thank you.
Thank you. Yay.
Oh,
Yay, thanks.
Thank you so
Yay,
much.
thanks.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
You're so wonderfully animated, Jane. I love it. Awesome. That is so fun. Best of you. It's awesome. Oh my God, thank you. That was so fun. Wow. Thanks, everybody, for coming. We so appreciate you joining us. Join us again next week.
Thanks, everybody. It was great.
Thank you.
That's wonderful. Thanks. Thanks, Jane.
Thank you. So good to see you, Lulu. Bye. There they go.
Thank you. It was so much
Bye.
fun and it was an amazing. Thank you.
Thank you
Nice
for
to see you
coming.
again.
All right. Jane, that was awesome. Thank you so much.
And you can
Wow.
Oh, yeah.
stop our recording when you're ready.
Oh, yes. Thanks.